favor that she couldn't repay. Tabitha knew she should somehow find a way to tell him that it wasn't necessary for him to come out to her house and do chores. Her mother would have chided her for taking advantage of his kindness. But even after all this time, Tabitha hadn't. All she seemed to be able to do was stare at him from the shadows of her home. What a sight he was, too. His face, carefully shaven, was lightly tanned. The muscles in his arms, now uncovered, clenched with every swing. Again and again he swung. He handled the axe like it weighed next to nothing. He hadn't even broken a sweat. She was embarrassed, she noticed. But maybe not surprised. Seth had been visiting her once a week for months and months now. The first time he'd appeared, he'd knocked on her door. She'd peeked out, saw his 6-foot form, short blonde hair, and chiseled features, and knew exactly who he was. Her former Amish community's only ex-con. She'd been so frightened of him, she'd hurried to the back of her house and hidden in the bedroom's closet. There she'd sat, practically hyperventilating, reminding herself over and over that her door was locked and he was nothing like her ex-husband. She couldn't imagine him raising a hand to her for some imagined slight. An hour later, after working hard to get her breathing under control, she'd ventured back out. When she confirmed he was gone, she'd opened the door and found a paper sack with some apples, fruit, cheese, and fresh bread, along with a note. "Tabitha, I don't blame you for not wanting to answer the door. All I wanted to do was chop some of your wood and drop this food off. A lady out in Marion gave me too much. You take care now. Seth." That had been the first of many visits. Sometimes he'd chopped wood. Sometimes he only stopped over to drop off a carton of food. Once he'd trimmed her hedges. Maybe about every 5th time, he knocked on the door, waited for a response that never came, then wrote a note. She'd saved them all. Seth Zimmerman might have gone to prison for killing Peter Miller, but he wasn't a bad man. The rumors were that Peter had attacked Beth Ann Hostetler, and Seth had stopped it. No one but Seth and God knew for sure what happened next. All that had been proven was that the two men had fought. Peter had fallen and hit his head on a rock. Since she knew just how much could happen when no one was watching, Tabitha reckoned almost anything could have transpired. Truth had a way of getting twisted and turned when it touched the bright light of day. Returning to the present, she rested her head against the window's frame and watched Seth some more. After yet another thwack of the axe, he put it down and stretched his arms. Then he turned and looked her way. Stark, steel-blue eyes met hers, and took her breath away. Tabitha gulped. There was no kidding herself now. Seth knew that she'd been watching him, probably felt her eyes on him every time he'd come out. He knew she watched him but didn't have the nerve to even say hello. He probably thought she was the same woman he used to know, his teacher, who had been barely 3 years older than him. The woman he used to tease about mice and bugs, while she pretended to be too mature to tease him back. Thinking of all the kindnesses he'd done, all the gifts and food he'd given her, Tabitha went to the kitchen and filled one of her baskets with homemade bread and a jar of the strawberry jam she'd put up at the beginning of summer. She braced herself, then walked to the door. It was time to go outside and thank him in person. At last. Yes, she knew a lot about fear now, and her heart and head weren't in as good a shape as they used to be. But that didn't mean she didn't know right from wrong. Besides, even if something bad did happen between her and Seth Zimmerman, Tabitha knew she could take it.